What was the worst reason a teacher gave you a bad grade? Because he didn't read my paper. It was a university class where a TA was responsible for grading the papers. He was clearly overwhelmed and just reading introductions and grading based on them alone. I had a 2-part introduction that fully addressed the prompt, but as he only read the first part, I got my paper back with a big C at the top. I ended up getting full credit after I challenged the initial grade. My first large college paper, for a pre-Civil War history class, freshman year, came back with a giant red D written on it with practically no feedback. I was in a writing room and I'd always excelled at essays, so I was sort of shocked. Went to the professor and asked him about the grade and lack of instruction. He sighed, looked down and said, "Westhoff, I don't like you." He went on and on after that with some bullcrap reasons, but apparently the big issue came from the first week of class. He was talking about manifest destiny and said something like, "Now, you have to remember, back in these days, there were about 50 to 100 miles between towns out in the western USA. And I'd raised my hand and said that there was still 50 to 100 miles between towns in the western US. He said I was exaggerating and I told him I wasn't because that's where I grew up. That paper was 40% of our grade. He refused to change the grade or even reread it. I scraped a C+ in that class and I was so freaking proud of that grade, even though it was the worst grade I received in my life. At the end of the semester, I decided to ask him for his grading documentation to see if I could challenge the paper with the school, but he claimed that he'd already thrown it away. I found out later that was bullcrap too, but I didn't press any further. We had weekly spelling tests in my 11th grade English class, which I thought was a bit remedial by that point, and had probably said so in a not completely diplomatic way. The teacher even made you write any words you got wrong 5 times and hand that in to her by the end of the class. I'd typically get perfect scores on them, but one time I got a test back with no actual errors, marked as a 0%. My teacher's explanation was that she saw me talking to someone in our free period before class who ended up doing poorly, and that was my fault because I distracted them from possibly studying. Wrote in Chicago format and lost points. The assignment instructions said to write in Chicago format. To anyone curious, I did try and point this out. I basically still lost points, but they upped the final grade. I have nightmares about getting the wrong footnote format as a former history student. I seem to remember one of my courses using a different format than all of the other courses at my university, and it messing a lot of people up. I did a presentation in biology. The teacher told me she wanted me to do a creative introduction instead of just opening it with the standard, "Today I'll be presenting." So I did. I invented a short story about an old lady going to the supermarket and worked in some early symptoms of Alzheimer's, the topic I was presenting. I was so invested in that character, she had a name and backstory. I even drew up a few comic panels so that everyone could follow along easily. Then, at the end of my presentation, I asked my class which symptoms the old lady in the story had, and hence what stage her Alzheimer's was. I get my grade back and the teacher deducted points for the intro since she told me to do a creative intro, so it wasn't an original idea. What? Like what the heck? I came up with the story, I drew the comic panels, all of that was me. I felt so betrayed. If I hadn't done a creative intro, she would have deducted points, so I did one and she deducted points anyway. And after all that work, still grinds my gears. I was 15 at the time. I was taking a 1-week online class. In the syllabus, the teacher said you must post 6 times throughout the week. So I posted 6 times on Monday, once on Wednesday, and felt I was good to go. I got my grade and comments, and the teacher wrote, "I thought you had some good posts early in the week, but then you stopped posting, so I had to mark you down." I was annoyed by this, but then realized it was the last online course in the program, and frankly, I didn't care. I still graduated, and that certificate is proudly sitting in my junk drawer for all to see. Taking online courses now, and the rule in almost every single class seems to be 1 post and comment on 2 of your classmates' posts. Every week it's the same posts. This topic is really interesting and important. I really learned a lot, especially about, a quote from the lecture slide, then a few responses saying, "I really agree. This topic is really important in today's industry." A friend of mine got a -1 for scratching his head. Our teacher said he was faking it. I guess that teacher had too many bad experiences with women who faked head scratches. My 7th grade gym teacher gave me a D because I hardly ever smiled. My life sucked at that time. "You seem like an unhappy kid. Let me give you something else to be unhappy about because of it. The beatings will continue until morale improves." I got marked down because the staples weren't in the right spot for my essay, even though I had them top left corner like always. That's when you know the teacher doesn't like you and is literally looking for petty reasons to take points off. Not me, but a 7-year-old student I coached for a public speaking contest. She's a child prodigy, a self-taught, fluent English speaker in a country where very few people speak good English. She also has a natural sense of how to structure a speech and gives all of her speeches impromptu instead of memorizing. After she finished her speech, the first response from the judges was, "Do you think you speak better English than us?" Spoiler alert, she does. I spoke to them and none of them were truly fluent. They then gave her the second lowest grade possible. She got a bad grade for being better than the person grading her. What grown adult is freaking threatened by a 7-year-old who specifically has been trained for the task they're judging? I didn't like a movie that was supposed to be the teacher's favorite. She'd do stuff like this all the time to other students as well. Complaints were made, but I graduated before I saw where they led. She gave me a 0 because she didn't think that I'd read the book. She said I would have gotten a 75% if she thought I'd read it. 75% of the test questions right supposedly means I didn't actually do the reading. Still one of those things that tease me off even 10 years later. In the 90s, my family didn't have a computer and I had no access to one. I spent a lot of time on a handwritten assignment for school and the teacher gave me a B, writing as a comment, "I would have given you an A if you had typed it up on a computer." I'm still bitter. My teacher lost my coursework on the bus home. I refused to redo a year's worth of work in 3 weeks and I got taken from an A to a C. Bullcrap. The school sided with him. This happened at my secondary school as well. The teacher won't admit to losing the work and then it becomes you versus them on if you actually submitted it or if they lost it. I've never seen a student win this argument. Seems like if you're going to pull that nasty stunt as a teacher, you should at least never admit that you lost it in the first place, even to the student. Just claim you never received the work. My friend failed French because she had a French accent. The teacher couldn't understand her French because the teacher was American. My friend had spoken French since she was 4. I got points off because of the bad grammar in the quote that I used. The quote was Oppenheimer's, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds." I got a 10 out of 10 on a test, but my teacher took points away from me because she didn't want my classmates to be jealous of my grade. This was English class in a Dutch school, so English is a requirement. I was the only native English speaker in my class, and this was a course for adults only. 4th grade, the day before Thanksgiving break. There was no work to be done, of course, so we had a busy work art assignment. We were all handed graph paper and told to color each of the squares either yellow, orange, red, or brown, and once we finished, we were supposed to cut out corn shapes to make Indian corn decorations. I already thought this was stupid and filling in all of the squares was tedious, so I traced the corn shape on the graph paper and only filled in the squares that would end up as part of the final product. This meant my decorations looked the same as all the others, but I didn't waste time filling in squares that would just get cut away. When the teacher saw what I'd done, she gave me a 50 for skipping work. A spelling test, not graded by the teacher but by the kid next to us. Kid named Anthony decided that all of my words that had letters U and E were switched and marked pretty much every word wrong. They weren't? Like, this was probably in 3rd grade, so my handwriting was chicken scratch, but that was really stupid to me. I was upset since it was the first time I failed something in school. I remember doing tasks in school all the time that required us to switch papers and mark each other. It was a way of saving time for the teacher, of course, but also a way to find out which kids were vindictive little jerks that wanted others to fail. When I was 16, in the middle of doing my GCSEs, my dad got into a serious car accident. He was in intensive care for about 2 months. During that time, we were told he would probably not survive. Thankfully, he pulled through, but in the meantime, I hadn't been doing any coursework or going to school. This happened in January, my exams were in May and June. I managed to do enough revision to pass my exams, but I never managed to finish my coursework for art class. The quality of my work was worth an A, but I hadn't done enough of it. I applied for mitigating circumstances, meaning that if I granted, my work could have been marked on quality rather than quantity. But for whatever reason, the school refused, so I ended up getting a bad grade. That was 10 years ago, and I'm still angry about it. I broke my right arm in the 3rd grade. I write with my right hand. The teacher gave me a bad grade because my writing with my left hand was barely legible. In the 3rd or 4th grade, some girl in my class broke her right arm, and the teacher did the same crap to her. And after the poor girl got upset about it, the teacher compromised by assigning some other girl to do her writing for her. They both had to sit at the very back of the room together, so the one girl could quietly dictate to the other all of her writing needs. Everything from multiple choice stuff to full-on creative writing assignments. And the girl who had to do the writing still had to do her own work and was given no extra time as far as I know. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I failed a literature exam in college because I answered a question too well. We were supposed to write an essay comparing and contrasting one of the books that we read that semester to a modern concept or ideal. We'd known about this particular question for weeks, so he had plenty of time to prepare. Apparently, it's possible to be too correct, because the response I got was that, though it's clear I didn't plagiarize, none of my thoughts were original and matched too closely with the author's interpretation of the work. I was the only person in my class to not only fail, but to get less than a B. I got no other bad marks on the rest of the exam, either. He failed me based just on that one part. I too got a lowered grade for answering too well. I'd studied and been to all the class sessions, so I knew the material well enough to be very succinct in my answers. Only filled half the blue book instead of BSing the whole thing. He gave me a C only because it was too short. From then on, I went back to skimming the reading and BSing the entire blue book tests. Made A's the rest of the semester. In high school, I used the word lascivious to describe a character in a book, and my teacher didn't know what that word meant. So logically, he took off a point. Me? Miss, you didn't give me a point for this, but it is on the mark scheme. The teacher? I don't agree with the mark scheme, so I didn't give you the mark. For context, this is a standardized test, which is why there is a mark scheme. This is a practice test. We used past papers and hence past mark schemes. Still complete bullcrap, though. By the same standard, if the narrator becomes a teacher, he can mark people down if he doesn't like the standard pens the students are issued. I got an F the first semester in chemistry, and I was really pushing myself to get a better grade for the next semester. I needed a good grade to study what I wanted. Then we heard that another teacher from another school would make the test, but the teachers in our classes would grade it. So I've been doing all in my power, reading everything, written summaries, doing the math, watching documentaries, and I got the final grade, D, and I was very happy with that. Then my teacher takes me aside and tells me that I actually got a way better grade. C could pass as a B, but if he gave me a C, it would look bad for him since I got an F on his test the semester before. So I was pretty teed off with that, but he left before I could say anything. It was my last day of school as well. When I was in college, I had a professor walking around collecting a homework assignment that was 10% of our grade. Being the unorganized person that I am, I was digging through all of my folders trying to find which one has it. She walks by me as I'm still looking and meanders toward her podium. Before she even gets to the front of the class, I find it and run it up to her to hand it in. She looks me dead in the eyes and said, "That's late. You got a 0. I called her a string of horrible things. She really was, this was just the final straw, and dropped the course and took it again with an amazing professor the next semester. Didn't happen to me, but a teacher kinda gave everyone in a class bad grades because they ditched her. They all planned to hang out after the last class. I guess she was bitter about it. This would be an A paper from other students, but you can do better. I got a C and no other feedback on how to improve. Area of improvement. Learn that overachieving only leads to more work, no job promotions because you become indispensable at your job, and non-monetary achievement certificates to hang in your cubicle. That teacher did you a favor, to be honest. I wish I was joking. I had a crappy religion professor back in junior high school. She lowered the grade of another student because they'd written in the exam that when Moses got the 10 Commandments, there was lightning when the correct answer was thunderbolts. Serious non-native speaker here. I know the difference between thunder and lightning, but what exactly is a thunderbolt? It's another way of saying a lightning bolt. Not really a correct way, but a way. I had a high school French teacher who failed me on a written test for using pencil. He claimed his eyes only saw pen. My family was outraged and called the dean, and the dean was like, "Oh well, he's getting them ready for standardized tests." My entire family had master's degrees, or more, and were like, "What standard test is in pen? It's always pencil. This is a school." Years later, I have my doctorate, and not one gosh darned test ever was pen only, standardized or otherwise. My paper didn't make her feel happy. It was an analytical writing course designed to teach how to write a thesis. The teacher was one of those super hippie artsy people, and most of the curriculum involved just writing articles she failed to get published. So we had to do this analytical discourse on someone's work, and it was trash, so I picked it apart. I got an F. I went to her saying, "What the frick?" I followed the rubric to the T. Her response, "Oh, well, the paper was good and all, but it didn't make me happy. It was kind of mean, and I don't like mean." I said, "The assignment was to find flaws in the paper. It had countless." And she replied, "Yeah, but it didn't make me happy. You get an F." I went to the chair, and it turns out her father was on the board of directors and she had sued the school several times, so she was bulletproof and got to do whatever she wanted. My grade came because all tasks had room for interpretation, multiple answers, and opinion, but my teacher only accepted his own exact opinion, interpretation, and choice. And I just remembered I had a teacher who gave me a D because he lost one of the 2 papers I gave in for my math exam. I took a low level, the lowest possible, modern literature course in college. The professor was apparently someone people knew. They had us read Dracula, specifically a copy of Dracula that they had edited, or something. I don't remember exactly what the contribution to the specific edition was, but their name was on the copy of a book originally published more than 100 years prior. The professor accepted no original thought, or even really unoriginal thoughts unless they were cribbed directly from them. I made the very basic connection between Dracula and the serpent in the garden. There's a passage in the book that straight up makes this comparison if I remember it right. It was dismissed as unfounded because that's not what the professor had talked about in class. The professor just wanted us to parrot back what he said in class on the test essays. It was a surprise to me that there was more creativity in some of my low-level engineering courses than there were in my low-level literature courses. When you have more open interpretations in math-heavy subjects than in your subjective opinion of literature, there's an English teacher who needs to be fired. Damn tenure. Also, the next story contains Spanish and you're going to have to excuse the narrator's terrible pronunciation. Not a bad grade, but I remember I was so close to being the first person to ever score 100% on my 10th grade Spanish final. The one question I got wrong was, ¿Qué tipo de comida es el pescado? What type of food is fish? The answers were A. El carne, meat, B. La fruta, fruit, C. El pan, bread, D. La verdura, vegetable. I of course picked meat and got it wrong because my teacher insisted that fish isn't meat. She's a Catholic and eats fish on Fridays during Lent. According to her, the correct answer is fruit because fish are sometimes known as the fruit of the sea. What the actual frick? Screw your 99%, senora. She liked my dad, so she gave me a bad grade and called him to go talk to her about it. I thought my design teacher had it in for me as he kept giving me Ds for what I considered pretty good artwork. So to prove it, I had my professional graphic designer father do my homework, another D. Then I had my professional illustrator mother do it the following week. D. When we called him out, he didn't really have an excuse on why he considered professional standard design work only to be worth a D in a grade 10 project, but we enjoyed calling him out in a meeting with the head of the year. I lost 2 points out of 10 on an assignment because a full mark means perfection and only God is perfect, and -1 point is only for instructors and professors. Each point mattered at the time because a full scholarship was on the line depending on our grades through the semester. Just to clarify, I lost 2 points out of 10, which is actually 2% of the whole grade. This was in the United Arab Emirates. I lost several more grades and similar assignments. In one of them, it was questions from a paragraph, so once I asked him and went through the answer step by step logically, he got defensive, accused me of wronging him and that he grades arbitrarily, and left the class. I lost 3 more points after that. I lost the A grade even before the final, and thus lost my chance at the scholarship. Nobody in the administration cared. I still resent him to this day. Essay topic. Was Henry V a hero? I argued he wasn't because crazy risks involved. You're not allowed to make that argument. F. Because I was homeschooled. I was getting my AA at a local community college and was getting my electives to pursue a degree in teaching. Several of our papers required us to write about our classroom experience as children. I got very poor grades on those, and when I asked the professor, she essentially said it was because I had no real classroom experience. Because little boys don't work hard enough to get an A, despite the homework, classwork, and exams being straight A's. I never tried again and coasted from then through graduation 10 years later. I was 7 or 8, in 2nd grade, so early 90s. She said that to me, then said it to my parents at the parent-teacher meeting a few days later when I complained. They complained too, and the school sided with her. The next year, the school put me with the best, most influential teacher I would ever have. Just a beautiful human being. I would even go back to visit her every year until she moved out of state. Miss her like hell. She even wrote me a letter of recommendation for getting into college. A super long shot, but Miss Showman, if you ever see this, I still love you and my whole family still misses you. Handwriting, often when the teacher refuses to let me type it. For the final submission of my graphic design college qualification, the brief was to design branding for a pub or club. I got a B because my concept was too cool. The brief was pretty basic and open-ended. It was basically along the lines of a brand new night spot has opened in the city. It's a pub during the day and converts to a club after hours. Design and develop a brand to promote this new place in the city. She apparently pictured a sort of dive bar in her head when writing the brief, but it was never made clear. She'd never once mentioned it when looking at the interim development stuff as I worked on it over the month we had to finish it. I could have changed tack at any point, but she never course-corrected me. The sheer mind-fricking bullcrap of that actually knocked me so hard that I didn't even bother pursuing it as a career beyond that course. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.